And we're just gonna look at focusing on our problematic behaviors.
Well, we have some dogs inside the house, and then we have some dogs that are more...
Yes. And you guys are breeding, right?
Yes,
okay,
we are breeding. We breed all small breed dogs, so nothing, too large.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. One of the problems is this: we would like them not to bark when people come inside the house, okay?
All right.
And my son's like, don't bring him in the house. They're just going to bark. I said, that's exactly why
Yeah.
bring them into the
Well,
house.
this is, how many dogs are in the house right now?
Well, I'll show you. So,
Okay,
careful,
because
my
already
dog-
this is, oh yeah, it's okay.
Slippery.
This is already very quiet, so.
Okay, yeah, it's not too bad right now.
Yeah.
It's not too bad. In here.
Oh boy, there we go.
But we still have a potty issue.
Understood, yeah.
And, which is annoying to us because I will tell you, we do have pups in here too.
Sure.
Like some of them are puppies,
Yeah, I got you.
They're not all dogs.
Yeah.
But I have 1, 2, 3 puppies in here. 3 puppies that are dogs.
Yep.
As you can see, we have 1 pregnant mom in here.
Yes.
And she, more so or less, does not stay in the house. She does not.
I got that.
Okay. So we are having issues with barking.
Yep.
Which this isn't terrible.
Yeah, this is, I mean, considering there's what, 2, 4, 6, 8 or 9 dogs in here, this is not too bad, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got a couple problem children?
Problem children, she barks constantly.
Yeah.
Stands at the window and just barks her head off.
I got you.
Okay? Fufu always barks if it's Fufu. Fufu barks if somebody is coming into the house.
Yep.
All of them do a little bit of this.
Yeah.
He's just a pup. He's 6 months old.
So is this all of them?
No.
Okay.
Then we're going to take you out to the place where they all are.
Okay, so goal number 1, these guys, all the barking. That's kind of goal number 1, right?
Goal number 1 is, the goal number 1 is potty training.
I understand, yeah. We'll get into that a little bit, obviously. Given your situation, I'm sure that one is going to be definitely a little bit more challenging, right?
Yeah.
But nonetheless, we could talk about some things that might be able to at least help you out a little bit with that. So, okay, so this is one kind of set of things. So potty training, obviously. Additionally, barking, just general, this kind of stuff.
My son does most all the training. Okay,
Yep.
He does all the training. And he's phenomenal. He really is. He's really good. But off leash, they don't. Like if we say sit, and we have to ask 20 times before they sit.
Yeah.
Things like that. Come. Just basic commands. But so this is one part of what I've got going on. But then I can take you to the main part.
Yeah.
Because you can see they're all on leash and on spot.
Yeah. And these ones, how many of these are yours versus?
They're all mine.
These are all yours.
These are all
So these are all dogs that are a part of the breeding program.
All part of the breeding program.
Okay, yeah, I mean, this looks very good.
And we've already been trained and taught on using the
e-collar?
e-collars.
Okay.
We're not, and here's what I wanted. What I was hoping with is like someone continue to work with Benji until he has got it.
Yeah, sure.
Is what my goal was.
Yep.
We kind of wanted him to get.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. Well, again, I mean, you clearly have done very good work so far, right? So, like, obviously, there's learning to do, but this looks really, really good. I mean, this is great. This is better than a lot of trainers are able to get with a large group of dogs. You know what I mean? So you're on the right track for sure. Obviously, the hardest thing is you have a full. I mean, how many dogs are there in total? 20-something? Is that what I heard? 20-something? Yeah. I mean, the hardest thing is just the fact that there are so many of them that we have to kind of calibrate our expectations based on, like, this is not like, me where I have my 4 dogs at my house, right? And I could be totally 100% consistent with every single one of them because it's only 4 of them. I try to look at, like, what are some realistic things? Like, I look at this no different than our facility, right? Like, we'll board, anywhere from, say, 20 to 40 dogs at our facility, right? And again, all of them are trained and I could get all of them individually to do all the different things, but depending on the group, depending on what's going on in the day, stuff like that, I have to calibrate my expectations on, how calm overall all of them are going to be because they're going to feed off each other, right? There's going to be things like that at play, obviously, right? So So little things like you were saying, like all of the barking, right, inside, for example, right? I would start putting a lot of emphasis into, you know, can we pick like 2 or 3 of them at a time that we stay like 100% consistent for a week on some of those types of things, get a little bit of an inhibition of some of those behaviors, and then move on to another 3, right? Or you could do it in groups of 4 or 5 or whatever,
and
right?
Does that mean if we do 3, then does that mean we add 3 more, so we do 6 then, and then we do 9, or you're saying only focus
Good question.
on 3 at a time?
Could be either way, right? You know, so let's just take something as simple as barking, because barking was one of the big goals that you had, obviously. But no different than enforcing your place command or your spot, right? Barking is, you got to correct for it, right? They have to realize I bark, a consequence happens. I bark, a consequence happens, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So as we create a consistent consequence for it, obviously the need to correct for it significantly goes down. Like obviously all of these guys, as opposed to maybe one of them, held place as we came in. Do you call it spot or place, or what do you? Spot, whatever, yeah.
Place, yeah, same thing.
Same difference.
Our indoor dogs know place
Yeah,
better, and
totally
the
fine.
next trainer taught us spot,
So you know, spot, whatever, they all know spot, where at this point, they just don't rehearse the act of breaking spot. You know what I mean? So you could probably go a week doing spot without needing to correct for it because they've been corrected for it consistently a couple of times. So we refer to as an inhibition has been created, right? Meaning they just don't rehearse it anymore, right? We've extinguished that behavior. So no different than jumping. If we took it in batches of 3 or 4, we could say, okay, cool. We're gonna pick these 2 right here and this one right there, and any barking, we're gonna be 100% consistent about correcting over the course of the next 7 days to hit the point where no different than they don't break the spot, when people come in the house, they don't bark incessantly either, right? And then hopefully we've created an inhibition of maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that, where they just don't do it, where we could focus on 3 more. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then once you've created that inhibition, or once you've created the reliability with your spot command, you're kind of in just maintenance stages, right? Exactly. If you start noticing that it slacks a little bit and the dogs get a little sloppy, we spend a week reeling it back in, right? Getting consistent about it again, and then you're usually good for a while. Not for my dogs, right? You never hit a point with training where it's like they just don't do the thing anymore ever and ever and ever forever, but I generally can, you know, whatever, not need to correct my dogs for a recall for anywhere from 3 to 4 months before I need to actually correct for it again. And then maybe 3 to 4 months later, they start getting a little sloppy with it. And I spend a couple days correcting for non-compliance of it, and then we're good to go again for a little bit again. You know what I mean? So that's what we need to start looking at. And training in the form of working these commands and stuff like that is very, very productive, and it's a great habit to do. But once we've had some of these things established, we want to start teaching them just to kind of make good decisions on their own, right? Like I don't want, like you're saying, I don't want to have my dogs on spot all day long forever and ever in order to get them to behave. I want them to just know I do these things and I don't do these things. So I guess my question then is, so regarding the dogs inside of the house, because this was very controlled coming out here. You did a great job with that. As far as the dogs inside of the house, are you able to do this with them?
2 of them, yes. The rest of them are puppies that are new. I've not trained.
A good first step that I would start with is I would try to be able to recreate this in the home also. You know what I mean? And you could just use their crates for it. You don't need, you know, spots. Obviously you got crates in there and stuff that you could use that. Maybe have one big bed that you can get 3 or 4 of them on or something like that. But having good routines can be very important also, right? So like with my dogs, with my 4, when people come over my house, I do put them in, we call it bed, but again, same difference, right? We put them into bed stays for the first generally, you know, 20 minutes that somebody comes over the house. Yeah, we get them to this place where now they're chill, again, heads are down, they're not as worked up, right? And then we could release them and let them kind of hang out then at that point. You know what I mean? So that would be the first thing you do is you already know how to get this and achieve the calmness, so let's replicate that in the house with all of those dogs and just spend a little bit of time making sure each one individually can work that spot command and get that relatively under control first. When you say when they're not on spot, they're not good, right? So let's say hypothetically these dogs were not on spot. What would they be doing?
They would, at least at the very beginning, they would definitely be jumping on you and
Sure.
barking, wanting to see new
Yep.
people get up.
Kind of like a friend, kind of like a frenzy.
Yeah, sure. Again, getting to real estate, like let's say my dogs weren't on bed when you came over my house and you just walked in my door, right? They would not jump on you because they've learned that jumping is not okay, obviously. There wouldn't be a ton of excessive barking because I've generally taught them that that's something that I do not want out of them in the house. But there is always going to be the initial excitement of like, oh my God, somebody new's here, right? And if they're not in command, they're free to essentially do whatever they want to do, sans the things that I determine are off limits, right? For me, jumping, barking, nipping, any of those types of things I don't allow. But like energy level, for example, it's very hard to tell a dog not in command to like bring the energy level down, to tell them like you can't take it above a 4 out of 10. You know what I mean? So that would mean that again, they're gonna, here's the front door, right? Somebody walks in the house, they're not on place, they're gonna be like, oh my God, somebody's here, right? And they'll run over and they'll be excited and they'll be wiggling and wagging and stuff like that, but they're not gonna jump and they're not gonna do all those other things,
Okay,
right?
so yes, okay.
Now, the more dogs you compound onto that though, the more that obviously becomes chaotic.
Yeah, it's very much harder to keep.
Yes, yeah, but they're not necessarily doing anything wrong. Like, let's say you had 20 dogs out right now and somebody walked in, like no different when we would do like daycare at the facility or something like that. When you walk in, those dogs are gonna run over to you. You know what I mean? And to an unsuspecting person, that could be a lot. Now again, they're not doing anything incorrect, they're not jumping, they're not barking, they're not nipping or biting or anything like that, but you will be circled with 25 dogs.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's where management comes into play, which is again why I have routines as far as spot. It reduces that initial arousal where it's like, okay, cool. We avoided that chaos. We let the energy come down a little bit. So now if we were to release all of these dogs, the energy level is going to be a little bit calmer and then we could focus on those types of things. The others though, you can go ahead and release all of them and we're going to take a look at their behavior once they're released.
With or without on?
With the leashes. They'll leave the leashes dragging though.
Out! Everyone out! They know out.
They're like, are you sure?
They're like,
And obviously this is normal in the training process that we go to release them. They're like, are you sure?
Oh my God, okay.
Let's go ahead and do this, right? So hang on one second. So instead of creating a ton of excitement to get them off like that, we're still gonna maintain a little bit of a degree of calmness, but maybe what we'll do is like, you know, if we're struggling to get them off, okay, I could just help off with the leashes, you know what I mean?
I agree. And that keeps the
Okay.
energy low.
Yeah. And then you could just let them all kind of do their thing.
Benji, he just said not so excited.
And if you need to use a little bit of encouragement, obviously that's fine. But we're just trying to kind of like moderate the excitement levels here so we don't create another huge burst of energy, right? Now, obviously right now they're hesitating on getting off, which is normal and which is fine, right? And listen, if they default to going back on the place, it's not that I have a huge issue with that by any means, but I just want them to know like you are free right now if you want to be free. You know what I mean? And I'll be able to, basically what I wanted to do here is I wanted to just see if they were gonna rehearse any unwanted behaviors so that we could start kind of addressing some of those things. We may just put our attention on the ones inside, obviously, because they're a little bit less trained, so we could focus on these things a little more. So at this stage, now that they all are free, again, they could do whatever they want to do. If they want to go back to the beds and lay on them or walk into the crate or something like that, that's obviously fine. But I'm going to be looking at what are the rules we determine are unacceptable at this point,
Yeah, that's
right?
what I would like, yes.
So let's talk about those real quick. So you mentioned jumping, right? Is jumping a big one that you don't allow?
generally yes. Obviously when they're on leash, but not really when it's just casual. When they don't have collars on,
Okay.
I don't generally try to correct them.
So here is the, not that I have, again, with little dogs, I would say it's kind of your rule as far as what you want. My couple big problems are, one, if we want to maintain a really, really clear sense of like, let's keep it under control because we have so many dogs, having that perk of them being able to jump, like a lot of these little guys, that's how they get themselves wound up, right? Like all of them in there, the loudest ones are the ones jumping on the gate and climbing at it and stuff like that. And again, not that it's like horribly problematic, but it's definitely adding to the arousal, right? So by creating a rule for jumping, that could help reduce some of the arousal. Now the second problem is, you mentioned when they're on leashes, you're consistent about correcting those things, but when they're off of the leashes, you're not as consistent about it. So that is exactly how we create a dog that becomes what we refer to like collar or leash wise, meaning when those tools go on, the rules apply.
Yes.
When those tools come off, the rules don't apply,
Right, that's
right?
what we have.
Now, obviously it's a little bit more difficult to create consequences and stuff for when they're not on a leash, but it's not impossible by any means, and we want to set our standards as far as enforcing all of these things fairly consistently with stuff, right? So jumping obviously is one of them. Let's say one of them were to jump on you. I wouldn't give a command. I wouldn't say spot. I wouldn't say down. I wouldn't say sit. I wouldn't say this or that. I simply would start just telling them no and having no proceed a correction, right? So no, we go over, we give a leash pop, right? No, if they don't have a leash on, we can give a little poke on the side, whatever. No, if we're using a squirt bottle, we can use a squirt with a squirt bottle. There's a million and one ways you can give a consequence to a dog, and every dog's a little different as far as what they're motivated by. Some dogs, again, spray bottle with water is very effective with, others will laugh in your face when you do it. I wanna kind of demonstrate some of these techniques and how they would work. We'll use some of the dogs inside, so let's do this. Let's just grab like a pinch collar, a e-collar.
He would like off-leash reliability because even with him, they're not reliable.
No, I understand.
They kind of like just do their own
Now, when you say off-leash reliable, like what does that look like to you though? Do you want to be able to take them to run in the yard? Like, are you looking to be able to do all their commands off-leash?
No, definitely not. I don't think doing commands off-leash.
We could get into, again, if your goal is, your personal goal, right, is to just learn more about how to teach all this kind of stuff, we could get into like, hey, here's some really easy ways you could teach off-leash recall, right, and things like that.
I want the dogs to enjoy themselves and whatever that's going to look like yet, but we're probably not. Do you think we're going to be able to get to the part where we're avoiding most of the pottying during the day?
Do you have concrete times and routines as far as like these are potty times throughout the day? Okay.
Yes, I do.
You do?
Yeah, obviously the morning. You generally do it twice. The general twice in the morning.
Right, and listen, we're not perfect with it. From the standpoint of there are still some dogs that will have accidents even with this schedule, because it's not like we have the same dogs over and over again. Like we have a new one that comes in that needs to kind of get with the new routine and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what we have is we have our general run schedule that we have for our dogs, right? Which is 4 runs a day. So we'll run them in the morning, we run them around 1 o'clock, we run them around 4 o'clock, and then we run them in the evening around like 9, right? And that for most of the dogs is good. If we start noticing a dog is not getting with that routine, we refer to as like the bedwetter runs, which are 2 extra runs that we do in between those runs.
Okay,
right? And the dogs that are extra problematic will run during those 2 runs also, so they get an extra one until we kind of break that habit of them having the accidents, and then they get switched back to the other one.
Now, what do we do when they're in here during the day and in between the runs they're having accidents? Do we need to be in here to correct that? Or
no,
we don't know
good question.
Who did it, if we're not in here?
If they're free, there's nothing you can do about it, obviously. Now, I will also say, like, for the majority of dogs, right, when I look at potty training accidents and stuff like that, I don't look at that so much as a dog problem, I look at it more as a human problem, right? We've trained them that going in here is okay, right? And we've trained them that going in here is okay by giving them too much freedom unsupervised, where they just do it and they're like, well, that worked. Why would I hold it for 3 hours if I can go pee right there and nothing happens? You know what I mean? Right. So since I look at it from the lens of like, we created that problem, I don't necessarily think it fair to correct for it. No, do I think that it actually does you a lot of good, because if a dog is gonna pee right in front of you where you catch it, one, again, they either truly think that that is just okay to do because of that routine we've set.
I would say our dogs think it's okay to do.
Or 2, I missed some sort of sign that that dog needed to go, right? So the couple things I would look at is, again, if you have, I'm sure there's some of your dogs that don't have accidents ever in the house, right? And those ones, if you want to start giving them some freedom, like I don't have an issue with that. But if you have dogs that you know are having accidents, or a couple of you're suspecting are having accidents, they cannot be unsupervised. You know what I mean? You look at like if you own 2 dogs, like how would you housebreak a dog? Well, you would make sure it's not out of your sight until you fully trust it. You would make sure that if you need the dog to be out of your sight and you don't fully trust them yet, you use your crate and you make sure that you're getting them out very frequently, right?
So I think that we just apply all those.
You're just zooming this out, 20 dogs.
We just crate them and then we put them out at times to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Or we're in here attending to them.
100%. Yeah. And I would be much more routine about your running schedules, right? It sounds like you have a pretty good one, right? I would probably just enhance on that and make sure that, again, because you have a kennel here, let's say you're not here for the day. You have whatever, something you got to go do or whatever, right? That run schedule is going to have to be followed by whoever is in charge of the dogs then at that point. I have I work with a lot of like newer trainers and stuff, and if I have a new trainer that's opening up a boarding kennel or something like that, these are all the same problems they experience also, because we kind of go into it, especially, you know, you didn't always have this many dogs, you know? I'm sure it started where you just had a couple and then a couple more and then a couple more and then a couple more. And with my dogs, like I don't have this routine at my house that I follow with them. It's kind of like if I notice one of them looks like they need to go to the bathroom, I take them out, right? And we don't have accents or anything like that, and it's fine. But if I had 20 dogs in my house, I'm not going to be able to watch all 20 of them to see like, oh, you look like you need to go to the bathroom, or you're hanging out by the door over there, or whatever it is, which is where the routines come into play to help you have the consistency where it's like I don't have to be so aware of them. They just need to know that if I hold it for 45 more minutes, she's going to take me outside. And I also, I guess one last thing, like I commend you for wanting to get these things under control, because I mean, I've worked with plenty of breeders before, and it's like a lot of times with breeding, it's like you have obviously your stud dogs and this and that, and it's like they're kennel dogs, right? And when they need to get bred, they get bred, and accidents and manners and stuff like that aren't usually on the list of priorities, because it's like we're just trying to produce good dogs, you know, but obviously because this is in your home, it's like you got to be a little bit more diligent about it. Who are our most problematic ones out of this group? Noise and all that wise.
Lucy never stops barking.
Yeah?
Never.
I don't know if I've heard her barking a whole lot so far. So he seems like one of them.
Yes.
Is that, would you say that's accurate?
Yes, and she's a barker.
Okay.
The black one and Harvest and...
So we're gonna hang out here for a minute. So right now, again, we're just gonna look at focusing on our problematic behaviors, right? So a couple ones that we've determined at this point. Thing number one is going to be excessive barking. So any full-on barking we're gonna be correcting for. Thing number two, jumping on people. Thing number three, jumping on the gate. Those are gonna be my big three that I wanna focus on right now. Now here's what we're gonna do if we notice it, right? So first and foremost, we gotta use a marker that's identifying the mistake. That's what no is, obviously, right? So thing number two with your marker, don't worry so much about like the firmness or the intensity of it, because it's just a marker. It's just letting them know that thing is what you're about to get corrected for, but it's not the correction in itself, if that makes sense, right? I'm not trying to make it so these dogs are like terrified of me or anything like that. I just want them to understand there are consequences for your behaviors. That's it, right? So let's say he were to start jumping right now. I would very calmly just no, right? Clear no marker, identifying that mistake. I would go over calmly, and then I would give my pop on the leash. Now your pop, you could be fairly firm with, obviously. We want to make sure that they're motivated by the consequence for it. But we're not going to follow up with any sort of information as far as a command or anything. Now you can tell her, that leash went on, she's like, place is what I do. Spot is what I do, obviously, right? So that's another thing. Again, it's not a problem that they default to that place when obviously they have a leash on or anything, but I want them to realize, like, you don't have to do that unless I ask you to do it. You know what I mean? And some of that may come down to, like, let's say her, for example, if she's used to collar goes on, I have to stay on place the whole time. Maybe collar just goes on and we just let her hang out, and assuming she doesn't do anything wrong, there's no corrections or anything. So getting back to collar wiseness, like we talked about, a lot of times our collars and our leashes and our e-collars and all those things, we as a human will be very reactionary with it, right? So let's use this as an example, right? So, no. Ugh. So I marked with no, I gave a correction just for the leash biting.
Yeah, no.
Obviously right there, good.
Is that good? Okay.
Yeah.
I want you to help us know what is too much.
No, you're totally fine. So obviously right there I would consider that the excessive barking. Listen, if you like let out a little or a little grumble or something, I'm usually a little more lenient with that, at least initially as I'm working through the process. If it turns into I am reacting right now, one no marker, correction for it. Now you said no a couple times there, just one time. Because the first one is what's identifying the mistake. If we say it 3 more times after that, we're identifying 3 more mistakes then, right? But again, right there, leash biting, nice clear no, went over, little correction for that, right? And clearly that correction was motivating enough. He stopped doing the behavior, and now we can move past that then at this point. As far as the collar, sometimes we'll be very reactionary with it, right? Meaning we wait until the dogs are misbehaving, then the tools come out, then we use the tools. Right? So what happens is every time we get that thing out and put it on in the dog's brain, it's like, oh shit, I screwed up and I'm about to start getting corrected for stuff. Or one of the big things we do with, say, e-collars or leash and prong or whatever it may be is we have them wear it just throughout the day to day, and we make it more just this natural thing that's there. and maybe only a fraction of a percentage of the day we actually use it. You know what I mean? So they're not kind of like living in fear of the tool. They're just understanding what the boundaries are then at that point. Yeah, again, every dog's gonna be, like this one didn't seem quite as motivated by it as that one did, obviously. So we'll see if she persists or not. You know, let's say I do that 3 more times, she keeps making the mistake, right? And she's clearly not caring about the correction. I would have to figure something else out for that dog then at that point, right? You're gonna hit a point where, let's say I said no right there for biting that leash and she stopped, right? You're gonna start to see that. If you see that, you still have to give your correction for it, right? And the reason for that is because we don't want no to turn into a bluff or a warning, right? It's not, you could rehearse the behavior until I tell you no, right? It's you can't rehearse the behavior at all, right? So I used to use the analogy all the time of if you went and robbed a bank and then went outside and the police were there and then went and gave the money back, you're still gonna get in trouble for it. You know what I mean? Even though you tried to make it right by stopping doing it, you're still getting in trouble for it, right? So it's the same deal, obviously, with the dogs at this point. And this is how we start to just create some calmness, right? It's just you guys being in here hanging out. There's rules, right? And we just have to start sending the message consistently and clearly of these are the things you're not allowed to do right now. You know, right now, because everybody's fairly calm, I'm able to kind of focus on everybody a little bit. We're probably gonna have to pick and choose dogs as we start doing that, because I would anticipate, obviously, a lot of them are gonna start making that mistake. But we're gonna give them 1 more minute here just to have some success. And then, obviously, we will start adding some additional distractions into play here, right? Now, one thing as you're going through the training process, and this is more for you than it is for them, is like you were saying, like in the training you were doing before, it's just like a lot of negativity, like bad, you need a little bit of positivity. It's very important that if you find yourself, like let's take him for example, you need to correct him pretty firm for that, right? I don't want to immediately be looking for the next thing that I can correct for. I want him to just sit in being good for a little bit and realize, okay, it's not that bad. Right? He could relax. Where if you're constantly like, all right, we corrected that, now we're gonna set up this situation and correct that, now we're gonna set up this situation and correct that, he's just gonna be like, I'm just not gonna do anything, right? He's not actually learning the boundary, he's just learning don't do anything. Yeah, stay on the spot or something like that.
That's their safe space.
Yeah, exactly. And again, some of it's inevitable, and because we're kind of working quickly right now with everybody, you know, you might see a little bit of it temporarily, but you just wanna be mindful of that. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna walk out, we're gonna come back in, and we'll see what we get. Now I'm just gonna go to right about here, and we'll turn around. I wanna see if we get any gate jumping. If we do, I'll have you be the one to mark with no and then go give the correction. I wanna see if our black buddy over there does it.
He's a gate jumper.
What's his name?
That's Harvest.
Hardest?
Harvest.
Harvest.
He was born in the fall, so
I like
was
it.
Harvest, but we call him Harry now too. Harry or Harvest.
I love it. Very good. He's already much calmer behind the gate here. And all of them are just kind of like, what's going on right now? You know, it's interesting, you see, like, as you start addressing the whole pack like that, they all just kind of get into this headspace of like, something's different, which is what we kind of want to see, you know?
Yes, and we need them to think
And
that.
right there, I think he did like a little huff. Don't worry about that. If it were to turn into the full barking, that's what we would correct for, right?
If we were to consistently do this, though, this will become the new norm, I'm assuming.
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
Exactly.
And then they're just not gonna be like, what's different? They're just gonna be like, this is normal.
Exactly.
Okay.
We're developing new habits.
Yeah.
And in order to develop a new habit, obviously we have to block some of the old ones, but that's how we kind of start the process. Very good. All right, let's go ahead and walk back in here. And we'll see as we come in, obviously, any reacting, any jumping, things like that. And you can tell he's behaving himself much more right now.
Yes.
So he's going to, instead of react and intimidate, just avoid, which is totally fine.
Okay.
Totally fine.
Yeah.
And that'll even out as he realizes, I'm not reacting and nothing bad is still happening. He'll start getting more comfortable. Because that's a lot of times, those big aggressive displays like that, like, right, like intimidation tactics, it's to try to make the scary thing go away because they think it's a threat, right? So as we,
He's very scared himself.
oh yeah. I mean, well, a lot of dogs are like that. You know, most of your reactive dogs you see or aggressive dogs you see, they're just terrified. You know.
does this help them get over that initial, like for instance, strangers coming
Yes.
in? It does help them eventually?
It will help him get past the fear, because you can't get past the fear if you're constantly in this aroused state of trying to defend yourself against it,
Okay.
right?
If you're not allowed to bark, then
Yeah. If you're realizing, like, I gotta keep it under control, and that's their way of making themselves feel confident, is by reacting, right? To make the scary thing go away. And they start realizing, I'm in control of this. As they realize they're not in control of it, and there's healthier alternatives to reacting that can help make him feel safe. Like right now, he feels safe by just going to the other side of the room. That's fine. I'm not gonna mess with him or anything,
Sure.
right? And then he'll start realizing, same deal. I'm not in control of the situation, but nothing bad is still happening.
Yes.
Yes.
And so then he
That's where the
won't
confidence comes.
He will stop.
It's the cycle, right? We block the habit, right, to then create a new habit, which will then create confidence in that new habit. Okay, so let's do this. We're gonna try walking out of sight for a couple minutes, then coming back in, and we'll see what we get with that. Okay, so in a second here, what we're gonna do is we're gonna test the front door again. So I'm gonna have you be the person that goes and does the door.
Okay.
We'll handle the dogs in here and see what we get with it. So no knocking or doorbell or anything. I just want you to go like open it, walk out, come back in, do that a couple times,
Yep.
and we'll see if that alone triggers them at all.
Okay.
Then we'll move to knocking or doorbell.
Okay.
No. No. Nice. Looks pretty good. So door opening and closing didn't seem to be much of a trigger. So we'll test the other one next. This one really does seem like, I would say, as far as the list of dogs I would put a lot of emphasis on too. No?
very scared.
Yeah. She's definitely pretty insecure, you could tell, and definitely out of any of them has definitely some separation anxiety issues, you could tell.
Yes.
So she would be one I would probably have the leash and prong on in the house, at least initially, with a tab to start correcting for some of that.
They have the most separation anxiety out of.
It's because they're the OGs.
Yeah, they.
I'm sure you love these dogs the
Yeah,
most also, right?
Yeah. Do you think it's because they were mostly inside? She was mostly inside. Now she's outside.
No,
Does it matter?
no. I mean, again, I don't know much about your interactions with these dogs all the time, but given the fact that they're the oldest ones, right? I'm sure there's the most attachment, right? Maybe
Okay.
because they're the OGs, a little bit more coddling and stuff sometimes, right?
absolutely.
Because you could tell with her, as soon as you left, like you were the trigger there. That was not a puppy thing or anything like that. Like you were definitely the trigger leaving,
Oh,
right?
really? Okay.
So we start to combat it by blocking some of those
What are
anxious
we
habits.
doing to create this?
Listen, it's probably not that you're doing all of these crazy things, and it might just be that you're not doing certain things, which is blocking those things, letting her know when she starts getting herself worked up and pawing at the gate or whatever,
Okay.
that we're not telling her like, hey,
So
you can't
just
do
the
that.
correction itself is going to help her.
It'll help rebalance the relationship, so it's not all you're the only source of good stuff and you're a resource and this and that, and it becomes like we're giving guidance, we're giving direction, but we'll also give some of that, right?
Okay.
And again, the little woof, not overly concerned about that as long as it doesn't progress into something big. Hey, that was pretty good. Yeah, why don't you knock a little harder this next time? Well, it's pretty good as well, actually.
They know they're not allowed.
Yeah. I love it. So we'll give them a second here, and then we'll do doorbell next and see how that goes. Very good. So she's controlling herself much better because before, and she's even checking in with me right now, which is really good. You know, it's the knocking with direction. You know what I mean? Because just knocking, like, if they're continuing to cycle into that behavior, like it's almost like self-reinforcing. It feels good to do it, so they're going to keep doing it, you know?
Oh, okay, I got you.
Where
You have to
we have to actually block the habit, right? And tell them, hey, when somebody's knocking, you're not allowed to do this. And what I was gonna say though is it's kind of like the compound effect, where it's like you start addressing some things and you just get the dogs overall into a little bit more compliant of a state of mind, you know? It's not like you have to necessarily go in and address every single individual thing. I'm going to let that slide initially. If it progresses any further than that, I'll correct for it. Because she obviously is practicing more impulse control than when we did it the last time, so. We're gonna do it a couple more times. So she's controlling herself better, but still a little bit of the barking, so I wanna see that get just a little better. I was just telling him, I'm okay with like 1 or 2 barks initially. It's like, oh my God, I'm startled from that, as long as she catches herself after and stops. There you go. I know, checking in with me now. Very good. That's what I want to start to see. I like it. Okay, this is looking great so far.
Yeah.
This is good though. I mean, I think we're covering a lot of good stuff right now. You know, the training is important. Don't get me wrong. Like commands are very important for management purposes and stuff. But when you have large groups of dogs, really it just comes out of setting clear boundaries. I find that that's so much easier to maintain in the long run, and they actually learn the thing you want. Because I was telling everybody, like my goal with my dogs, right? I don't want to have to micromanage them all the time with commands. I want them to just know what not to do and just hang out.
There's no reason really to train them. It's not like we're going on giant walks.
Yes.
With tons of them and whatnot, but
Yeah.
Deer.
Yep.
Or wildlife or something like that. I don't know if that can be averted or not. I've been telling them every time they've been doing it, been saying, leave it.
Yeah.
I mean, I could say no or whatever.
Because leave it is just interrupting it, right? No with a correction would actually inhibit it, right? So you look at this. So the keys for stopping any unwanted behavior we want, whether it's breaking out of a fence, whether it's barking at the front door, whether it's freaking out in the kennel, digging holes, anything, right, is consistency of catching it, making sure there is a non-negotiable 100% correction every time that it happens, and then 3, that the correction is motivating enough, right? So let's look at your fence situation, right? And let's look at, like, let's say this were a farm and you had a bunch of cattle, right, that were being kept in with like an electric fence or something like that. They would stop breaking out because every time they tried to break out, something unpleasant happened, right? So you get into that figuring out what's going to be the easiest thing to do. My first question I would ask is, do you catch it every time they try to do it, right? And if you don't, that means that for now, until we get this under control, anytime those 3 go into the yard, you've got to be able to have eyes on them. Doesn't necessarily.
We do.
Good. So you do catch it every time.
We catch it, but we weren't correcting it.
No, I understand, but you're physically catching it. Like you see them do it every time they do it.
Yes, because when we haven't,
Yeah.
we have had a nightmare in our hands.
Understood, understood. So you got to catch it every time, which you're already doing, which is great. So now we just have to make sure we're in a position to correct it. And that's where you get into certain things like that is where like e-collars I think are just so much easier.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like it's way easier than chasing them around a yard and giving a correction and stuff. You actually can address that problem much, much faster that way.
During those times, we do use their name.
Good.
We say their name and then we say no.
Now, one thing with that, as far as name is concerned, so not that I have a problem with using name before commands, that's fine. Like if I were going to say leave it, or I was going to say down, or drop, or come, or whatever, you can say name first, it's not a problem. That being said, I generally do not want to use a name before a punishment, because I don't want to turn the name into the punishment. You know what I mean? No is just, that is it, right? Now you get into inevitably with multiple dogs. When I was saying no, every dog that got corrected in here at some point was kind of like, wait a minute, is it me, right? And I just tell everybody, again, that's the inevitable kind of side effect sometimes of things. But it's not a massive issue, right?
But when they see the correction, they know who it is.
Exactly, right? So you kind of get with the no marker, everybody stops for a minute, is like, wait a minute. Did I make a mistake? And then the dog that actually gets corrected realizes, oh, it was me, right? And they'll correlate it with their behavior.
Right. Did you train her yet, Benji?
No, I have not trained her.
She's just a good
Well, she hasn't done anything wrong.
Yeah.
She's just chilling.
She's
Yeah.
She's
I mean, your big problematic ones right now are this one, and just general puppy biting and stuff. He seems very mischievous, we'll call it, you know, which is fine. He's a puppy, you know what I mean? But starting to curb some of those types of things will be helpful.
And she is just sitting there in the corner not doing anything, okay?
That's because that leash and prong is on, which is good. I mean, she hasn't made any mistakes yet, which is fantastic. So we just need her to keep having that on until she loosens up a little more, so she realizes it's just my behavior that makes the corrections happen. It's not just the tool. But here's what I would like to do. So assuming you guys want to kind of keep doing some of these where we could keep kind of working with stuff, I don't really think there's anything else I want to really push today. I think we've covered a lot of good stuff, and I think your biggest homework assignment right now is just managing this, right? So everything out there looked really good, right? Everything in here needs a little bit more control, and you're not going to do it with commands. You're going to do it with starting to kind of pick and choose who you're correcting for things and get some of that stuff under control.
How much can you start handling?
It's up to what you guys want. You know what I mean? Like I'll tell everybody, like I'll help you as much as you want. It's just, you know, obviously we have our immediate goals, which is this kind of stuff, right? We have the household goals and then we have the human goals, meaning household goals, these dogs need a little bit of training, right? Which we're doing right now. Then you have the human goals of you want to enhance your knowledge so you can know what to do with other dogs that you get in.